Hello there. Thank you for tuning into Town Meeting TV's ongoing coverage of the 2024 election. My name is Bobby Lucier. Tonight we'll have a forum for you in a series of forums that we're bringing you in advance of the general election on November 5th, 2024. These forums are made possible by Town Meeting TV's generous underwriters. Thank you very much to that generous crew. You can find all of our forums this year at cctv.org/general or on our Town Meeting TV YouTube channel, where auto-generated captions are available. If you're tuning in on YouTube, please subscribe and follow along to local democracy this election season. On tonight's program, we'll hear from two candidates running for the Vermont House, specifically the Chittenden 6th District. They are Kate Lally, a Democrat, and Deb Mayfield, a Republican. Thank you both so much for joining us tonight.
Great to be here.
Awesome. We've prepared a list of questions for you both, and you'll have 90 seconds to answer each question. I'll get my timer out here, make sure.
Term in the legislature. The reason I wanted to serve our community in this capacity, I've been a volunteer in Shelburne for over 20 years. And when I ran 2 years ago, before that I had been a select board member. And I saw that state government and policy sometimes stood in the way of some of the just the goals that we were trying to have in our community, specifically for making our community more walkable and for economic development. So I wanted to see if I could help with that. I think that we as a state are facing some really significant challenges: affordability, education, healthcare, housing, and resilience in the face of climate change, and that we need to work together to solve these challenges. And I serve on House Transportation, and we are kind of at the nexus of a lot of these things in our committee, and we work in a bipartisan way to address a lot of these problems. And our bills have been reported out unanimously.
I'm going to stop you there.
Great.
You'll have plenty more time to,
Sure.
to speak for the rest of the forum, but thank you so much. And we'll hear from Deb Mayfield, your opening statement.
My name's Deb Mayfield, and running for Chittenden 6, hoping to represent the people of Shelburne. I'm a mother of two, a grandmother of two. I'm a business owner of Shelburne. Had the opportunity to have the Shelburne Country Store for since 2004 until about 2 years ago, and I couldn't think of a better way to get to know our community and get involved in our community than being right in the heart of the village and being able to interact with people, finding out what their concerns are, and I would hope to be able to carry that forward and continue to listen to people, finding what their concerns are and how we can resolve any issues there are.
Great, awesome. Well, thank you both so much for running, and thank you for being here tonight. We'll start with our first question on property taxes and education. This year, many Vermonters will see a double-digit increase in their property taxes, and nearly a third of school budgets failed on town meeting day. So how will you approach education funding reform and property taxes for the coming fiscal year? And we'll start with you on this one, Deb.
Be about maintaining the quality of the education without having as severe of expense, whether it's trying to find a unique way to maintain that, shared services, investment in technology, that we could do cost-saving measures by using technology to help the kids learn, but wouldn't be quite as expensive. Auditing the current expenditures that we have in the schools, and seeing how some of these private schools can function on their smaller budgets, but still can provide a excellent education.
Thank you so much, Deb. Kate Lally, your thoughts on property taxes and education?
Yeah, I think we need an education system that is going to serve students effectively, but also that as a state we can afford. Particularly given the many challenges in front of us. In our community, Shelburne, my education property taxes went up by 20% this year, so I'm certainly feeling the pain. I think this is a cost issue, not just a tax issue. How do we manage the cost of education while we ensure that all Vermonters have access to a world-class education and that empowers them to thrive? Act 127 was enacted before I came to the legislature, and it certainly changed the funding model in ways that exacerbated Vermont's spending problem. The Future of Education Task Force is studying the scope of the problem so we can be intentional and effective about how we fix it, because we need to fix it. And a couple of things are becoming very clear. We are supporting a lot of schools that are just too small. And regionalization models like the BOCES model in New York can really help with sharing resources and costs district-wide, and this could make some significant savings for our state. I think there are also ancillary costs of supporting students that are being picked up by the education fund, like mental health expenditures and many social services, and we also need to look at health care. So I think the ultimate answer to our revenue challenge is to grow our economy, build housing, and create prosperous communities. One of our greatest challenges is demographics in Vermont.
Thank you so much, Kate. Thank you both for your thoughtful responses on that question. Next question is going to be about housing. This past session, Democrats and progressives in the House proposed spending an additional $100 million per year. Oh, you'll figure that out. On publicly subsidized, $100 million per year for 10 years on publicly subsidized affordable housing. This level of investment was not passed, however, in the Senate. So the question here, would you support this level of public investment in housing? And we'll start with you this time, Kate.
Sure. So housing is an area I've worked hard on this past biennium, drawing upon my professional experience as a regional planner. And I also served on the Shelburne Planning Commission for 15 years, and I work with communities in Lamoille County. The need for housing, especially affordable types in places near jobs, is pretty desperate in Vermont. And while I support a strong public investment in affordable housing, I don't believe that it will ultimately address our challenges. I believe the answer lies in public-private relationships, partnerships, and regulatory changes that make it easier for us to develop housing in the places where we believe it should go, which is in our centers. The housing reforms that we passed last biennium now afford this potential, and I'm looking forward to the opportunity to take next steps in the coming session to expand housing opportunities and to especially integrate transportation and land use. We've got to build more housing. We made strides towards this, but we've got to do an awful lot more. I think we need to build housing for our workforce, but I would like this to be built by the private sector's production builders, and then that frees up scarce resources to focus on the people for whom there is not a market to build housing for them otherwise.
Great, thank you, Kate. Deb Mayfield, your thoughts on housing?
Thank you. There's no doubt that we need more affordable housing in Vermont, but I think it would be, rather than having it government spending, it would be more fiscally responsible to streamline permitting processes, or giving some incentives for private sector to be able to do more developing, and there has been some in Shelburne, different projects that have begun, one right next to my location where they're building affordable housing now. So I think if they continue with private sector building more affordable housing and have that through the permitting process, I think that could be a good solution.
Awesome. Thank you both so much. We'll now move to a similar but distinct topic, which is emergency shelter. Vermont reported 3,295 people experiencing homelessness in 2023. That's up from just over 1,000 people in 2020. This year, the state is rolling back its pandemic-era emergency shelter capacity across the state, which is pushing hundreds more Vermonters onto the street this fall. How will you approach the need for emergency shelter in the coming session, and how should the state pay for it? We'll start with you, Deb Mayfield.
I think the emergency shelter should also involve a bigger picture versus just having the 80 days that they get to check into the motel or whatever the temporary shelter is. More focus on the root causes, whether it's physical ailments and getting better medical treatment for them, or if it's drug addiction or mental health, but trying to resolve those issues so it doesn't become a continuing cycle. A lot of the people that are there are on a continuing cycle and limited to the 80 days being in the shelter. And also trying to give some resources that they can be sustainable on their own, be able to be independent after those 80 days, come up with a plan of when they check into the temporary shelter program, finding out how can we get them to be able to get on their feet, whether it's getting services for them or helping them find a job or ways of transportation to a job. It just, the expenditures for the shelter program are very high, and without having an end goal in place, it's not serving its need.
Thank you, Deb. Kate, your thoughts on emergency shelter, how to meet that need?
Sure. I mean, this is a big part of the housing problem. So the people left in our emergency housing program, for the most part, are the very vulnerable people at this point. People with disabilities, who have disabilities and are elderly, just have a lot of complex needs, and also single parents with kids. I think that housing these populations does require public investment, and as a society that we should be doing that. So we funded our central challenges. We funded an emergency housing program with one-time federal funds to address public health needs during the pandemic, and with the clear knowledge that these programs would expire when the funding went away, which it has. So I have to say I am disappointed that the administration has not done more to develop a long-term plan, which the legislature has asked for repeatedly, and come up with a long-term plan and leverage other programs that would be available to help this community. So that's my answer.
Awesome. Thank you both so much for your thoughts on that important topic. Reminder here that you can call in with your questions for our candidates for the Chittenden 6th District. That's 802-862-3966 is the number to call in with your questions. But for now, we'll keep moving on with the questions that we've prepared here. Our next question is on public safety and criminal justice. Public safety is a top priority for many voters in this election. This past session, lawmakers increased judicial staff, increased retail theft penalties, and expanded restorative justice practices in Vermont. What more needs to be done by the legislature to advance public safety and repair Vermont's criminal justice system? And we'll start with Kate Lally.
Well, I think everybody wants to feel safe in body and property. My family recently experienced a small but thankfully very minor version of what many people fear. We inadvertently left open a garage door, and it led to our cars being rifled through and some small things stolen. So kind of a wake-up call to, how common these challenges are in our state. So I think there's a relationship between addiction and crime in our communities, and there's a lot of work for us to do in making sure that we address some of the upstream causes of crime, greater access to drug treatment, access to education and job training, and importantly, the transition from incarceration to the community. CCV and the Vermont Department of Corrections are working on a pilot project funded by Senator Sanders through an earmark that is expanding education and training for incarcerated individuals. I think at the same time there's also a need for enforcement. While it's important that we address some of the underlying causes of criminal behavior, we can't ignore that it's a problem and we need to enforce our laws.
Thank you, Kate. Deb, your thoughts on public safety and our criminal justice system?
I believe the public safety is a government responsibility. Building a strong relationship between the community with law enforcement helps prevent a lot of the crime. We do need to enforce our current laws, recognize the importance of addressing underlying reasons for the crime, which is the drug and mental health issues. And I think our efforts would be better spent trying to help curb the drug crisis. And they have to be able to enforce the laws that are on the books now.
Thank you both. Well, let's get into the issue of the overdose crisis with our next question here. 231 people died from an overdose in Vermont in 2023, with 95% of those overdoses involving fentanyl. What must be done to prevent overdoses, promote addiction recovery, and deter the illegal sale of opioids in Vermont? And we'll start with Deb here.
I would be right back to being able to prosecute for the crimes when someone is blatantly out selling drugs. They should be prosecuted for that. Also for selling fentanyl that is killing people when that's associated. But we have to come up with a better program for encouraging people to give up the drugs. We've spent a lot of effort on providing clean needles, safe injection sites, and not as much access to that as there is for a rehabilitation center. It leaves the community having to clean up the discarded needles, and that ends up with frustration within the community. Recently in a Burlington school, I believe it was, where the teachers have to go in early to check the playground to make sure that there isn't anything that the kids can cause harm to the kids. And that's just, shouldn't get to that point where the teachers are having to go in early just to make sure that the playground is safe.
Thank you, Deb. Kate, your response to the overdose crisis.
So addiction is a tragedy at the personal and the community level, and the drugs are becoming hard on the street are becoming harder, and treating addiction is becoming harder. So I think we need to expand our access to treatment. There are, I think, roughly 12,000 Vermonters currently in treatment, and we need to continue to expand access to Narcan and other treatments for overdoses, and it's very hard to keep up with this because the drugs keep, of course, changing, and the solutions to them as well. I think in the end, addiction is a disease of despair, and so helping people recover also means finding ways to provide access to housing, education and training, and a community that will support them. So hopefully they can rejoin society and start to contribute to it. Working in Lamoille County, I've become very familiar with the work of Jenna's Promise, and I think that Jenna's Promise provides a community model that we could successfully replicate across Vermont, and I think it would be in ways that really reflect our strong community ethos in our state too.
Great, thank you both. We'll change the pace here a little bit for the next few questions. We'll have a round of lightning round questions. So these are yes or no questions, or you can maybe elaborate for 10 or 15 seconds or so, but we'll go back and forth a little bit more quickly on these. The first question here, should private schools be funded with public dollars? And we'll start with you, Kate.
Private use, oh, okay. No, I don't believe so. Sorry.
It's okay.
I wrote the question down the wrong way, the different way. So.
Okay. Private schools funded
with
with public dollars, just to make sure we're on the same page.
Yes.
Okay.
No. I don't think that private schools should be funded with public dollars.
Okay. Thank you, Kate.
Okay.
Deb,
I'd like to see school choice.
So yes, private schools should be. Okay. Next question here. Do you support raising the age of family court jurisdiction? So this means keeping folks who are maybe 18, 19 out of the criminal justice system, raising that age for eligibility for the juvenile court system.
I would say no, because after reading about it, DCF doesn't have the staff to be able to do what they need to do to give the support services for that.
Great, thanks, Deb. Kate, should raise the age, yes or no?
Yes.
Yeah.
I agree. It should be raised.
Next question here. Should biomass, meaning burning wood, play a role in emissions reduction strategies? Kate.
Yes, I think so. I think everything should be on the table for getting us there and doing it in a cost-effective way. It may not be ideal, but it's a start.
Thanks, Kate. Deb, should burning wood play a role in our carbon reduction strategies?
It's kind of a catch-22 because it's depending on how you look at the biomass. It could have a zero impact on the environment. I'm a wood burner, so I wouldn't do away with it.
Thank you. Next question, do you support a statewide ban on assault weapons? And we'll start with Deb.
Assault weapons, as said, yes.
Thank you. Kate, do you support a statewide ban of assault weapons?
I do.
Should legislators be paid more? This one, do you start with you, Kate?
Well, that would be very nice, but I don't think it's currently realistic.
Okay, thanks, Kate.
No.
No. Do you support, we should have had a question about the F-35s now as they pass over us, when you can probably hear it. Do you support banning or limiting student cell phone use in schools, Deb?
Yes.
Yes, Kate?
Yes, I do, and it doesn't cost anything, which is great.
Thank you. This question here, where do you get your news? And we'll start with Kate.
Vermont Public, Digger, 7 Days, The Economist, New York Times, NPR.
Great, thank you. Deb, where do you get your news?
WCAX, Vermont Daily Chronicle, Shelburne News, a handful of sources.
Great. Awesome. And do you ride the bus, Deb?
I do not.
Okay. Kate?
I do, but not in Vermont, which is a problem, and I serve on House Transportation, so I'll be working on that.
Okay. And last question, maybe the most contentious one here. What's your favorite ice cream in Vermont? We'll start with you, Kate.
Oh, totally, the chocolate dip maple creamies at the Shelburne Country Store.
Okay.
A tradition these
That
guys
I would
began.
go with a twist. No, I have a new favorite. It's the peppermint stick from Island Homemade Ice Cream.
Okay, awesome. Those both sound delicious, and I've got to get over there and give those both a try. Okay, so we've got about maybe 5 or so minutes left. We'll move forward with a question on healthcare here. One of the primary drivers in rising school budgets and affordability issues in Vermont is the increasing cost of health insurance. What can the state do to reduce the cost of healthcare and meet the healthcare needs of everyday Vermonters? And we'll start with you, Deb Mayfield, on this question.
Starting with wellness, focusing on the wellness side of things before things can progress to become a problem would be a cost saver. Also trying to eliminate redundancies, whether it's having to call to get verification from this one or that one, or trying to get appointments is very challenging, that you have to talk to 2 or 3 secretaries before you can get an appointment. But somehow between working on redundancies and focusing on wellness.
Thank you, Deb. Kate, your thoughts on healthcare?
Yeah, well, over the past decade, the per capita cost of healthcare in Vermont has risen faster than the national average, and our outcomes have declined. So we are spending less on primary care than in the nation, and we are paying more for hospital care in the nation. And we have a bunch of regional hospitals that are going to be in very serious financial trouble very soon. Despite a lot of medical spending and rapidly rising costs. So I think housing is a big part of our problem. Housing is a big problem, every problem in Vermont, I think, these days. Our hospitals can't discharge patients because they have no safe place to go, and that's tying up hospital beds, which is very costly. So the Green Mountain Care Board just released a report by Oliver Wyman. I took a close look at all of the drivers of costs in our healthcare system and has made some recommendations. I'm interested to see how our health and human resources committees will decide how healthcare should be reallocated to better focus on preventative care and increase access to services for all Vermonters. Given our aging demographic, I'm really glad to know that the administration, with support from the legislature, is negotiating a Medicare waiver that would allow us to experiment with an all-payer model designed to emphasize preventative care.
Great. Awesome. Thank you both so much. Got time for maybe one more question here, and maybe we'll jump to the political temperature question here at the end. This is number 12 on the list here. Political differences were front and center this biennium, with the governor vetoing a record number of bills passed by the legislature, and the legislature in turn overriding a record number of those vetoes. Talk about a time that you worked across differences to accomplish something, and how you might approach collaborating with colleagues that you don't always agree with. And we'll start with you, Kate.
Well, I think the legislative and the democratic process is inherently messy, and disagreements are part of it. I think the important thing is to try to, disagree without being disagreeable. I think, my starting point with everybody that I deal with in the State House is we're all there to try to make Vermont better and stronger. So I serve on House Transportation, one of the money committees. We're responsible not only for transportation policy, but for maintaining and improving our infrastructure. Everything we do touches on health, a climate strategy, and our state, the health of our state economy. So our committee includes some very smart and committed Republicans, including the House Minority Leader. And I'm very proud of the fact that while we may disagree on specific proposals at the beginning of the legislative process, we end up reporting out bills unanimously and fully bipartisan. So that is requiring a lot of work, debating, working through disagreements, looking for ways to achieve common ground. And I actually was able to, with the support of my Republican colleagues, get an initiative through that changed the law from recommendation for 4-foot passing on our roads to making that actually the law. It's now required, and towns can erect signs and so forth. That was came at through the process of negotiating and listening very closely to what some of the Republican colleagues were interested in and finding ways to support their goals. And it was like a win-win. It was in our DMV bill, if anybody's interested in taking a deep dive into the arcana of the Transportation Committee.
Thank you so much, Kate. Deb, your thoughts on or your experience with working with folks that you don't always agree with?
We all have things in common, and so it's a matter of finding common ground and how you can make a compromise. And there's almost any situation, I can't think of one that you can't make a compromise on. I'm not really sure how much further I can go with that. It's difficult because I own my own business, so I don't have to report to a boss. But I work with my employees every day, and we don't always see eye to eye of how something should be done, but we talk about it and we come up with a compromise, and I have to respect their input, and that's about it.
Okay, awesome. Thank you both so much for joining us tonight. We have time for just 30-second closing statements here, and we'll start with you, Deb.
I want to say thank you for having us here, and I would hope to be able to have the opportunity to represent Shelburne, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to just have a chance to run.
Great. Thank you so much, Deb. Kate Lally, your 30-second closing statement.
Sure, yeah. Well, again, I really appreciate this opportunity to talk about things this evening, and it's been a real privilege to serve Shelburne, and if I'm fortunate to be reelected, I look forward to continuing to, bring my pragmatic approach to the State House.
Awesome. Kate Lally and Deb Mayfield, thank you both so much for joining us tonight. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And thank you for tuning into Town Meeting TV's ongoing coverage of the 2024 election. You can find this program and many more at cctv.org/general. And don't forget to vote on November 5th. Thanks so much, and so long.